and welcome back to Insemination, the podcast of all things donor conception. My name is Laura High, your chaotic sperm donor baby of the podcast world. I am so excited that you all are here today. I always say that, but I am really excited because we now have the final part 3, the conclusion of my genetic testing with Dena DNA. I am so excited. She is going to be reading my results from my very first genetic testing panels. I'm excited. I'm really nervous. I know that knowledge is power. I know it is, but I am very nervous. So I'm excited that we all get to do this together. And I'm excited that you all can see what this process was like. So to see if that you are interested in it as well. Before we get the episode started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please like and subscribe to the podcast, leave a review. Those kinds of things really help within this world. Please follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Threads, on Facebook. My handle is @LauraHigh5 or just search Laura High, High. Please remember that this podcast is filmed. It is put on YouTube if you are a visual learner like myself, so you can watch it, not just listen to it, because I get distracted way too easily with that. And also, please remember, I am a stand-up comedian and do perform all around the States. You can find my show schedule, www.laurahigh5.com. I've got some wonderful shows coming up through the end of November and the beginning of December, although I believe that I think this podcast will be published right at the beginning of December. So I have some great shows coming up in December, and I'm already booking some road work for next year. So hopefully I am coming to your state. But you know what? Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to the episode. Welcome back to the podcast, Dena. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm excited and nervous to hear my results. I have to say, because everybody listening, I don't know what's about to be said. We are going to be discovering my genes together. I'm nervous. I'm excited because I will have information, and I know information is power, but I won't lie. I'm a little like, oh shit. Oh, I'm clinging on to the ignorance is bliss right now, but I know that that's going to be gone in a mere minutes, but I know it'll be okay.
Well, I just want to put it out like ahead of time that there is nothing that's going to drastically change any of your medical plans.
Oh my God.
Take a deep breath before you start. I like to, make sure you know that right ahead, so you're not like,
okay,
what next? Yeah. So there's nothing, and everything that most of the things that were found are really more for your reproductive risk that we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a few things that are that might have some bearing on your own health, but nothing too drastic. So we're going to start with the cancer panel, because that one we looked at. Let me just get the total number. So I had put together a panel of a whole about it was like 80 something cancer genes, and then 100 genes that are proactive. So there's different, with the lab that I used at the time, you were able to put together your own panel. So I put together the proactive that I usually offer to people who are adopted, donor conceived, or don't have a family history. So those are the common hereditary conditions. And then the cancer stuff. And so with the cancer stuff, the other reason we did the cancer panel was because of your pituitary adenoma, right?
Yes.
And I wanted to make sure you didn't have one of these multiple endocrine neoplasia syndromes, and you do not. So those tested negative.
Okay.
Very good.
Huzzah for me.
Yes. So just reminding you, so there, people can still have it without testing positive, because there are, 30,000 genes in our genome, 20 to 30,000, and we only tested, a little under 200 for this panel. So there's still a possibility of something, but for what we know today and what our current technology can detect, you do not have a mutation that would, cause.
Yeah, we'll take it. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't explained, why you had that, but at least we know that you don't have one of these detectable MEN conditions. And then you also, because you have some Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, and we know that BRCA has a 10 times higher rate in that. That was tested. That's negative. So you don't
Okay,
have.
that was the one that I was concerned about. So, okay. So that's a huge sigh of relief that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's good. And then all the other cancer genes that were tested as well. So
oh my God.
Point,
okay.
yes. So that's
huge.
So yes. So the cancer panel was negative. You did have something called a variant of uncertain significance. Do you remember we talked about that a little last time? Okay. So basically when I ordered these genes, the laboratory reads through all the genes that I order. So it reads through them, sequences them, looks for little pieces missing or added. And typically they know which versions of genes are normal and which versions cause disease, because from looking at, thousands of genomes and looking at people with disease and without disease, they're able to know which ones are normal and which aren't. Pretty often they'll find something that is a version of a gene that's less common. Mm-hmm. And if it's less common, there's not enough evidence to prove that it's normal variation, even though most of them are normal variation. So that's when we call a variant of uncertain significance. And most of those are just normal variation, but they just need to be found in more people before we can say that it's absolutely negative. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, only about like less than 10% of those actually end up being upgraded to pathogenic or disease causing, but the vast majority of them are downgraded to benign as more people get tested. Okay. So this is common. Almost everyone I test with the big panel will get at least one VUS. Okay. But so it's not something you need to worry about. I will watch it over time. I put it in my system. And then the laboratory also will send me a new report when more people are found to have this particular variation. Okay. And I looked at the variation. It doesn't look like it's something that is concerning. So a lot of times what I do when I see a VUS, actually every time, I will look at it in this big database called ClinVar. And I'll also look at how other labs are interpreting it. And this one was interpreted as probably it looks more neutral than another change. So the actual gene change doesn't look very suspicious to me. So that's something we'll watch over time, but probably doesn't mean anything.
Now, I apologize. I maybe it was, but did you say it was specifically that this was something to do with my ovaries? Was that?
No. This one it's associated. So the gene is called PDGFRA, and it's associated with gastrointestinal stromal tumors. So it's nothing you have. Okay. And usually I usually tell people not even to look up what it is usually, because a lot of these are going to be benign variation. Okay. If it was a variant in MEN, which causes pituitary adenomas, I would be a little more suspicious. But this is one that, first of all, has a lot of variants in it. So it's not that abnormal to find a VUS in this gene. But also it's something, again, it doesn't look suspicious to me. So I think most likely it's just a random neutral change that just happened like somewhere in your family line, and it's less common in our population databases and therefore can't be called benign.
Got it. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. Yeah. And then that's something that anybody, like I said, everyone I test gets like at least one of these because I do big panels.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I do like a deep dive, and this one didn't look suspicious. And I'll continue to follow it. And if for some reason it does get reclassified as pathogenic or disease causing, I'll reach back out to you and we'll talk about what that means.
Okay. I hope I only get follow-up calls from you to just be like, hey, I'm coming to New York. What's that? Like that's what I hope, not this.
Yeah, no, it's very unlikely this is going to be anything.
Okay.
I most often these get downgraded and then they just get taken off the report.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So that one is not so worrisome. The other one that was found, and this one was also on the carrier screen, is a mutation or a pathogenic variant in the gene MEFV, which causes familial Mediterranean fever. Now that is a recessive condition. So
Okay.
if you remember, we have 2 copies of every gene. And if
Yes.
someone in a recessive condition, if you have one copy not working, but the other copy working, then you're a carrier. And if
Yes.
you have both copies not working, then you have the condition. So this is where we're kind of shifting into the reproductive stuff, because if you're a carrier and your partner's a carrier and you both pass down that abnormal version of the gene, then your child could have the condition. So with familial Mediterranean fever, it's a condition you definitely want to have your partner tested for, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of the recessive ones we'll switch gears in a second.
Okay.
The reason this was on the proactive panel is because in some cases, people who are carriers may experience more fevers than normal, because it's a cyclical fever, it's a periodic fever syndrome. So you can be a carrier, and like there's studies showing that in some cases, people who are carriers may be slightly affected. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. So I can't remember I think I saw in the notes that someone in your family had fevers.
I mean, I feel I had a lot of fevers as a child.
Okay.
I definitely had a lot of fevers as a child. I feel like I had more than normal. I might be wrong, but it felt like I was sick with fevers way more. I had a crap load of strep throat.
Yeah. Okay. So and we don't know. That could have nothing to do with this, or it could be like this could be one little piece of that.
Yeah.
It's hard to know, but that's why this gene is on the proactive panels, just
Got
to
it.
have that. So like if you had told me, I do get these fevers more often in adulthood, or
Not in adulthood, no.
okay, yeah. So if you had any of these kind of weird symptoms, then I'd be thinking more about maybe looking a little further into this. But
Okay.
I don't, at this point, I don't think it's something that is as important for you as it would be for
Okay.
your family planning. So that's another one. That one, the mutations in that are common in people of Mediterranean descent and then also Jewish descent. So that there's a good chance that's from the Ashkenazi side.
Okay.
Or I don't think you have any other Mediterranean
No,
that are
I don't think so.
okay. Yeah. So that's that one. So the thing about these, like when we say, okay, this is more common in one population, that doesn't mean it's non-existent in another
Okay.
population. It just means that it's less common. So absolutely, it does not matter what your ancestry background is. And a lot of people
Got
don't know
it.
their ancestry anyway. So that's why these pan-ethnic panels, meaning, giant panels that are the same for everyone, makes this testing more equal. Because then everybody gets tested for the same things, because we don't know, what someone's going to have. And even if something's rare, it's still possible. So
Yeah.
absolutely, anytime someone carries anything, their partner should be offered testing for it,
Got it. Okay.
regardless of their ancestry. Yeah. But then we're going to go to the carrier screening, because there's more stuff on the carrier panel.
Okay. Yay.
Yeah. But any questions so that was the proactive part.
No,
So
that okay.
yeah. So those were those results. So cancer panel was negative. Proactive stuff, it was just the MEFV mutation. And then let me open the other one. And then I'm gonna have a minute of dead space. Hold on.
We're good. In this little dead space while Dena brings this up, how is everybody doing today? Are we doing happy? We doing healthy? Please remember to subscribe to Insemination wherever you listen to your podcast, because we that kind of stuff helps us get higher up on the leaderboard, leaderboard. So please make sure that you also leave us a review, all that good stuff. And remember that this entire podcast is also filmed and put on YouTube if you are a visual learner like myself.
Amazing. Okay, I have the other result.
Okay.
So this is the carrier screen, and this one looked at 569 genes associated with recessive disorders and a few associated with X-linked as well, which is a little bit different. And so you actually are a carrier for 5 different conditions.
Okay.
which happens. Like
Is
every
that
human,
normal? High?
no, it's a lot of people carry conditions, and
Okay.
it's really not a big deal because
Okay.
most humans carry something. Um, and the question is just is what you carry on this test, right? Because like every time a human is created or is developed, there's going to be some random genetic changes that happen,
Yeah.
and usually they're in areas or places that probably don't matter. But when they're in a gene that actually affects the function of that gene, and that gene is that function is important, that's when it can cause disease. So basically, yes, every human carries a number of different genetic variants, and every human carries lots of variants because there are some that are benign, so many of them are benign, and that's what makes us so unique, right?
Yeah.
And that's why like every ancestry group has different variations, and that's how we do testing for ancestry, is looking at all those variations. But most of those variations don't cause disease. They're just normal, different versions. It's like I like to think of it as like recipes. If you ask a bunch of people to give you a chocolate cake recipe, no one's going to bring you the same recipe, but they're all going to be chocolate cakes at the end, right? And that's how our genes are too. So there's no perfect version, there's no normal version. And that's why we have so many genomes in our research database, is to look at kind of a consensus of what is quote unquote normal. So does that does that make sense?
That totally does.
Okay, good. So basically what I'm trying to say is, yes, it is, there's no like normal or abnormal. That it's, definitely we see people that carry lots of diseases, and then we see people that don't carry anything that's detectable. But this is a big test, right? So not everyone gets such a big test.
Okay.
I think it's great to do this big test, and I think, the more you do, the more you're going to find, the more so that's one of the reasons that there's so many. So
Okay.
But
I
it's
think
so
the result
important.
is definitely going to be my husband is definitely also going to be getting tested
Oh,
after this.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the result of this, no matter what.
100% what needs to be done. And I
Okay.
think we should have a big panel like this too, just to make sure. But
Well, I think you're going to be getting another call from us very shortly after this episode going, Dena, how do we set this up?
Yeah. Perfect. And then the cool thing is that when your partner does it, there's like it's much less. I think they do it for like $100 to add on your partner, something like that. I have to get.
I think we're gonna be gonna just write a check immediately and just go, all right. I mean, no one writes checks anymore, but I think we're gonna send you some money ASAP over and go like, this is what's gonna happen. Let's just sign this up.
Yeah. And I think it might even be less than that, but it's easy to do. And then what they'll give up me, one of the reasons I really like working with this lab, is they give me a combined report. So it'll show you both of you and like who carries what, and if you match, and then what the residual risk is. Meaning like, sometimes we don't detect something on a genetic panel, and so there's some residual risk that you could still carry it. But even though that's really low. So anyway, that's a cool chart, we can go over. But for now,
great.
We'll focus on you and what
all right. Hit me with your best shot. Let's do it.
Yes. So the first thing is that you are a carrier of cystic fibrosis, which is very common in people of European ancestry. You carry the very common allele called delta F508, which is the most common one that we see, and that causes the disease cystic fibrosis. But again, you only have one copy. So the other copy of your CFTR gene is working normally. So very important. Again, you should get your partner tested. The other thing about this, and this is something that is newer in the research, is that people who are carriers of CFTR or cystic fibrosis may sometimes also exhibit slight symptoms. And so there's a higher chance for something called pancreatitis. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically this chronic inflammation of the pancreas that can cause like extreme pain, issues with digestion. People go to the ER a lot with this like abdominal pain that's that it's hard to diagnose. Okay. So if you were to have a bout of extreme pain and they can't figure out what's going on, you can let them know that you are a cystic fibrosis carrier, and there's an increased risk for pancreatitis. And then
Okay.
target that, right?
All
I used
right.
to see a lot of these patients in clinic, a lot of the chronic pancreatitis patients, and it was very difficult because a lot of them had this like undiagnosed abdominal like attacks of pain. And there are some of these people that end up in the ER a lot, and sometimes are not taken seriously, or the medical system thinks they're seeking pain meds, right? And really they're in a lot of pain because they're having pancreatitis. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's good to know this information, because having this information can then at least give you this like a paper that says, hey, I have this increased
Take
risk.
me seriously, please.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's really good to know that there can even be side effects of even being a carrier.
Yes.
That is really good to know, because that wouldn't have been something that I would have even thought of, that there are side effects if you're a carrier. But yeah, with that alone, absolutely, Dave needs to get tested.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, that's the reason. So the personal risk part is so different than the way we used to present this even like a few years ago. Because a lot of times when you think about people being carriers, you're like, oh, they have no disease, it's a silent carrier, right? But now with more like knowledge and more people getting tested and more people being studied, we know that there's some of these conditions you can have slight symptoms as a carrier. So now they're starting to be reported on these reports, but we're in this kind of transition phase where we have to kind of rethink the way we think about carrier screening, because there is this chance of the person who carries the mutation having some symptoms.
Yeah.
Having something, right? There's another recessive condition that if you have 2 copies, it's a very severe disease called ataxia telangiectasia. But if you have 1 copy, it's actually a cancer risk mutation. So there's a lot of instances like that people don't think about that can come up on carrier screening. So I guess to everyone listening, just thinking about how carrier screening is so important for reproductive risk, but it's also important to talk to someone that understands the results and can interpret for you if there is personal risk for
absolutely
what you carry. Especially in X-linked disorders, you don't have any of the X-linked that we're going to go through, but a female assigned at birth who is XX, if one of the X's carries a mutation, then she may have some subtle symptoms, where if it's a XY person who's male assigned at birth, then they would have the full-on disease. And so for a long time, we thought that X-linked carrier females weren't, like, they were just carriers, but a lot of those conditions actually do affect the female. So just another thing to put out there, that is something that's important to know. But anyway, back to your results. So the CFTR was the first one. And then there are, you are also a carrier for something called congenital disorder of glycosylation. There's nothing.
That's a mouthful.
Yes. And then factor 11 deficiency, which is a form of hemophilia. And then the familial Mediterranean fever, FMF, that we talked about before. And then tyrosinemia type 1. So those are all conditions that are not known to have any effect on you. So those are
that was my next question.
Yeah, they don't have any effect besides the familial Mediterranean fever, what we talked about. But so the rest of them are pretty much known to be pretty silent carriers. And so that the most important part about these conditions, about carrying them, again, getting your partner tested.
Yeah. Okay. We will do that.
Yeah. Perfect.
Dave is unfortunately out of the room, but otherwise I'd be like, Dave, just give her your credit card number now.
Yeah. No, all good. Okay. We'll work on that later. But yeah, so definitely, I think all in all, it's really amazing that you did this, because obviously if you were to, not do this testing, and then you went on to a child, and let's say he's a carrier for CFTR as well, you could have a child, a severe disease. So this is really important. I think every single person that is going to get pregnant should have this testing. So I'm really glad that you did this, regardless of answer. Because the thing about carrier screening is that people don't have a family history of these conditions because they're recessive diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't see them in family history until, you match with someone who carries the same, a change in the same gene, and then you have this kid with the disease. So that's why, like, when we talk about family history with carrier screening, that's not as important. So it's really great that you did this for your reproductive risk.
And I think that this is something that, like, again, I mean, as you said, I think this, ideally in a perfect world, I think this is something that everybody should do. I think this is very good information to have. But do I encourage all of my DCP and NPEs and donor conceived people to please, 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 if you can do this financially, I really, really advise you to do this. And I would encourage recipient parents. This is something that you cover for your donor conceived child. Or if I have adoptive parents out there, please do this for your adopted child. I think this is absolutely something that this is something that should happen. Yeah.
Or you can ask if carrier screening was done on the donor. That's another thing that's really important. I know.
You know
what
I'm going to say to that, going like, I don't know if I would rely on that, but
okay. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing when we think about this. So when you adopt a child, or when you adopt an embryo, or when you use a donor, like egg or sperm, and then you have a baby from it, we don't typically offer this type of testing for children. But, like, I think there's some gray area there, because, as we've talked about before, without knowing any history, it is scary and not as equal to not have this history for one baby but have it for another. So I think that there's definitely room to grow when we think about, like, the ethics of testing children, right? And so I think this is a topic that is going to become more commonplace. There are certain institutions that are actually doing huge panels on babies and looking for anything that would affect their own health. So, like, I think there's a study called, like, Baby Seek, and then there's another one, I forgot who, but I'll send you some of the information. But that it is something that can be done with research. It can be done, meaning that you wouldn't pay for it, because if you're enrolling in a research study, then they pay for it. And then also for carrier screening, when you're doing family planning, it's typically covered by insurance. So that's something, like, I think we talked about this last time, but if finances is an issue, that shouldn't be the only that shouldn't be a barrier to getting this. So there's financial aid available, there's insurance coverage typically, but if for some reason it is just impossible to get, it is only a few $100s out of pocket, so not thousands of dollars.
Okay. Okay, Laura, edit this. Hold on. Wait, I had God damn it. Where the answer fell. Where'd it go? The question. Oh, fuck, what was it? Oh, okay. So, Dena, in the same way that you were saying, like, ask the bank, ask the clinic if if they do a carrier screening. And obviously, everybody, the things, there's no regulations around this. So please, always be careful. And one thing that I would suggest to all of my intended recipient parents, I would also suggest this to donor conceived people if you're trying to get information from your bank or clinic. One, I would always suggest try and keep everything in writing. Always get emails. Emails is how we have evidence and proof. But Dena, what would you suggest if recipient parents or donor conceived people were trying to get more information from their clinic or bank about the genetic screenings that they do? What what should be the language in which they ask, like, do you do a carrier screening? Do you, like, specifically, what would be the things that
Oh,
you
good
would suggest?
question. Good
Yeah.
question. Yeah, so you can say, did this person have a carrier screening panel? How many diseases or how many genes were on the panel? Was it sequencing or was it genotyping? Because those are very different technologies when we're doing this. So knowing that information is going to be really important, and then asking for a copy of the report. I know that the thing is, when it's anonymous, I'm not sure how the banks handle that with the names. Like maybe they'll take off the name on the report, but at least they can give the report, or like the genetic results part of the report.
I will say, like, again, this is I'm not 100% sure, because I'm like, everyone handles things like a little bit differently, and how I would say they label things. But a lot of the banks charge extra for like an in-depth like medical history on the donor, which is like absolutely absurd that they charge extra for that. I know.
Yeah.
It's absurd. No, it's absurd. Yeah, you pay for the vial, and then you also pay for the medical history.
Oh, that's crazy.
They might offer, like, you can get your basic donor profile, but to get like an in-depth medical history, yeah, a lot of them charge extra, which is again, this is it's so absurd to me that they do
That's
that.
if they even have it, right?
That's it. Even I'm like, that's the thing. Like, you're paying for something that really might not be accurate, because, well, so much of it is self-reported, but what you're referring to is the genetic testing. But yeah, and so what Dena said, please rewind, please listen to that again. But what I would specifically do is ask those questions in an email, and then get an email answer, get everything in writing, and you save those emails. I will say, personally, for me, how we've been able to get help for recipient parents. We've been able to, in terms of like legally, or help them out or expose certain things, is if we have hard evidence of something, if it's in writing. So that is why I encourage all recipient parents, get everything, save every scrap of paperwork they hand you. Because hopefully you never have to touch it again. Hopefully you never need it. Hopefully you are never giving me a call because everything is fine. But in case you have to call me, you want to make sure you have a copy of everything that they've said. So, and I think that that's a very, very good question for you to ask, because hope this never happens to you, but let's say you ask that question to them. They say, okay, yeah, we do all of this. 10 years down the line, you find out, oh my God, they didn't. You have it in an email to prove that this is what they said. It's very important to get these things in writing when we have this little, when we have so few regulations in place.
Yeah, I like that. I think the other thing two other tips, hot tips.
I love a hot tip.
Yeah. A lot of banks will have a genetic counselor that works there, and you can have a discussion. Usually you can ask to speak to the genetic counselor, or like ask certain questions, and most genetic counselors are very open to talking to patients and answering questions and explaining things. And so I would say that's another thing, is you can ask to speak to the genetic counselor that works at the bank. The other thing too to remember is that even so these carrier screening panels pretty much grow every year because new genes are added. Sometimes genes are taken off if they're found that they're actually not helpful. But they do expand as we learn more, as we get more information, as our technology improves and the price goes down. And so what somebody had as a carrier panel 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, is so much smaller and different than carrier panels now. They used to do genotyping, meaning that they were looking only at the common variants that they knew about in these genes. And now they do sequencing in some cases. So they're looking at the whole gene. And so there's pros and cons to both of those technologies as well. So with carrier screening, it's important to remember that it changes so often. So most likely by the time a child is like even 10 years old, their panel that was done on their donor is going to be so out of date, right? Because it's been years later. So that's another reason why, like, I'm thinking this whole the movement towards allowing everyone to get tested or population testing, regardless of history or ancestry, is so important because it will level the playing field when it comes to understanding risk assessment. So just something to remember, that even if your clinic or bank did everything possible at that time, it still will not, it'll be obsolete in a few years. So, and they're not going to be retesting every year the donor.
Yeah.
So it's just something to remember as well, that's they may have done what was right at the time when the donor came in.
Absolutely. And I think that it is a very important thing, is that donor profile that you have is a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a living, breathing picture. It is a snapshot. This does not, that is how they are right now. And that is why the genetic testing and getting it done by, in my opinion, again, and this is just very personally with me, how, in dealing with the banks and clinics, the fact that Dena is not tied to a bank or a clinic, the fact that a lot of genetic counselors are not, I do think is safer. Now, Dena, one of the questions that I'm asked a lot, and I don't know if you've had experience in this, is, has a parent bought a vial of sperm from a bank and said, Dena, we'd like you to test this? Is there like a way for you to test a donor from a bank? Because a lot of parents have asked me that.
Okay, so great question. So you can't test sperm because it's a single cell, right? So it's so once you test that particular, each sperm will carry a different set of things, right? So
of course,
one sperm, you're right. So even you can't just test one. It's not a sample of the rest of them. So the answer is, you can't test a sperm vial and expect it to be it's not, they don't all have the same genes in them.
That makes a lot of course, as soon as you say that, it's like, oh, of course, Laura, though.
Yeah. So they're all going to be different because of the way that, like, when sperm's being created, the way that genes, like the two chromosomes are recombined and restructured, which is why, sperm is it's a lottery. So which one gets done? So yeah, you can't test a sperm, and even testing an embryo, you have to grow it out to a certain amount of cells. So you can't, it's the same with an ovum or an egg cell. You can't test those. Once you test those, they're gone. So that's why when there's embryo testing, it's a biopsy of a few cells of an embryo, usually a blastocyst at this point, that is like 100 cells already. So then that for the most part that will reflect the genetic code in the embryo. But yeah, you can't. So that's why when we talk about testing donors, it needs to be the person who donated, because then we can get a whole picture, right?
Got it.
Because the only carries half of the genes needed to create an embryo. So so you have to test the person to know what the chance of them then passing down a condition is.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So if this is like an anonymous donor from a bank, they're like, obviously I do not encourage whatsoever anybody to use an anonymous donor, but like but even an open ID at 18. If this is a donor from a bank, there is no way to take and unless you literally physically have that donor to be like, here, can we test this person out? There is no way to take any information, any DNA that from the banks. The only thing that the bank will have is sperm, and bring it to you and be like, can we verify any of it? There is no way to do that. You have to physically bring the donor in.
Yeah, you would have to talk to the donor. That's why you talk to when it's anonymous, then the bank is in charge of that test. And a lot of them do genetic testing, and then they can bring that information to the recipients. But I will just preface this with, again, I don't work at any bank. I know every bank works differently.
Yeah.
Everyone does different testing. Yeah. But I have a lot of friends that are genetic counselors at different banks, and they really do try to advocate for both the donor and recipient, and just making sure that everybody's getting what's best for them. So I think it's important to talk to that bank's genetic counselor who can, and there's a whole group of genetic counselors actually who work in donor gametes. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of them out there. I don't specialize in donor gametes, but that's why I test the people once they're born. And I have tested donors before, people who wanted to be like egg donors or sperm donors, and they came to me independently saying that they wanted to show the clinic that they had, if they had any genetic test results, and they themselves felt that if they did have a mutation, then they should know so that they could disclose that. But like, that is like so much to expect for a donor to go through.
That's very surprising to hear. I mean, I love that personal responsibility, like, way to go, those donors, high fives all around. But yeah, that's not,
but it's so few and far between, like,
very few and far between.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, is those all the things that I'm a carrier for? Is that my, okay.
That's it. So like I said,
we can deal with that. We can work with that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is, I mean, my biggest fear was you were going to turn to me and be like, Laura, I'm really sorry, but like you due to this chocolate mutation, you can no longer have chocolate, or you'll, I was like, what is she going to tell me I can't do anymore? Like, Laura, you have no more vodka syndrome. Like, that is what it's going to be. And I was just like, God damn it. So I'm like, okay, with what you've told me, I'm like, I can deal with this. This is, we can work with this. And okay. So as we have said, we're gonna get my I'm going to hang up off this call and be like, Dave, you are going to get tested now.
Yeah.
And he can get like the same panels. Would it be good for him to do like the carrier panel? That's what we should do.
Absolutely. He needs, first and foremost, carrier screening. Yes.
Okay.
Because of your results. But then also, if he has family history of anything. So there are really these, when we're thinking about family planning, there are these two categories. There's the recessive conditions that someone doesn't have a family history usually of. And so that's why everybody should be offered that testing, regardless of ancestry. And so those are the big carrier screening panels, or we call them expanded carrier screening.
Okay.
So that's the recessive, the reproductive risk. And then there's what I think of it more as proactive or preventative. And that would be like the cancer syndromes, the cardio syndromes, the common conditions that affect people in adulthood, sometimes in childhood, but mostly the adult onset conditions. And those are the conditions that I tend to focus on, because I think it's really important when you are family planning to know that, because if you do have one of these high risk gene mutations that, like, let's say if you have a BRCA mutation or Lynch syndrome, which is another cancer syndrome, then you can actually do IVF and screen out basically create embryos and then select embryos that do not have that mutation to ensure that condition doesn't get passed on. So to me, it feels like a missed opportunity when you're family planning to not know that information. So that's kind of my unique view on it. So that's why I wanted, to do the proactive stuff for you, but also the carrier stuff. So those are really the two parts that I recommend. And especially for somebody who doesn't have a family history that they know of, doing a proactive panel, because like I said, adopted or donor conceived, or just doesn't know their family history, the proactive panel can really help at least rule out the common, hereditary conditions, because there's no family history. So again, it equals the playing field a little bit for people who are, for not only for their own health, but also for the opportunity to then not pass that on to a child.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So if your partner has a known family, like if he knows his family history and it's pretty clear and we're pretty sure about that, then he may not need to do that. But if he wants to do the proactive one, we can talk about it. If there is family history of something, then we can talk about that too. But for sure, the carrier screening needs to be done.
Okay. Amazing. All right. I love this. And Dena, obviously, if anybody is interested in doing this as well with you, whether they are donor conceived, whether they're an adoptee, an NPE, a recipient parent, or just somebody who's really interested in learning more about their genetics, how do they find you?
Yeah, great. So I have a private practice that's telemedicine. So I do it this way, via Zoom, called Malibu Genetics. And I can see people in multiple
I
states.
wonder where you're located.
Well, I'm actually a little bit north of Malibu, but I
Okay.
liked the whole feeling of, the luxury wellness, like full service, genetic.
Instant think of palm trees. That's all I think of it with that
Exactly.
mallet.
And my
Yes.
logo is a palm tree helix. Like, have you
Very
seen the
cute.
logo?
All right.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, you can see me that way. I will the issues, I don't take insurance, but I can provide a super bill. I have pretty reasonable rates, especially for people who are, again, who don't know their family history. I have different rates because there's it's a different structure of what I'd be doing. So
Okay.
so I have and insurance never covers that. So almost never covers it for people who just want like a proactive panel. So
Yeah.
that's why I've worked with some of the labs to try and get like a good deal for those patients. And then if you do know some of your family history, there are genetic counselors that, or you're just wanting a carrier screen, regardless of if you know family history or not, you can get that covered by insurance. And there are genetic counselors all over the country. There's 5,000 of us in North America. And so you can go to findageneticcounselor.com. But yeah, if you want to see me for like what I did with Laura, then malibugenetics.com. And I'm
Okay.
happy and if I can't see you because there's state licensure, so I can only see people in certain states. There's a handful of states I can see them in. If I can't see you, then I can find somebody that can see you.
Okay. And then and this was something we covered in I think the first episode, but I'd love to cover it again because I've gotten this question. Doing genetic testing with you, is that going to affect somebody's health insurance?
Great question. So in the United States, there are laws at the state and federal level that prohibit genetic discrimination for someone that does not have a condition, but has a predisposition based on their genetic results. And so that law is called GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And it prohibits health insurance and employers from discriminating against somebody. So that's like if you are asymptomatic, you don't have symptoms, but you have a predisposition to, let's say, a cardiac or cardio syndrome or a tumor syndrome, then you are covered by GINA. And so your employer cannot hire or fire, make any hiring or firing decisions based off that. Your health insurance can't raise rates or deny coverage, but it doesn't apply to life insurance or disability or long-term care insurance. So they are allowed to ask if you've had genetic testing, and you would have to disclose that. Otherwise, it's insurance fraud. So I usually tell people before they do a genetic test, and I should also say this is for not for carrier screening, because carrier screening is not it's talking about like it's more for reproductive planning, but for the other type of testing that's for your own health,
Mm-hmm.
that's where it can be an issue. So I usually tell people to take out a life insurance if they're ever planning on taking life insurance. Some people don't want it at all, but if you do want it, to think about taking it out before you get your genetic test so that you have a plan locked in place. So that's usually what just something to think about before you do any genetic testing.
Amazing. All
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
Well,
one more thing for you.
yes,
No
for
more.
me. Oh
So
my
yeah.
God.
No, this is not bad. This is
Okay. Oh shit.
this is just
Okay.
I because I'm a cancer genetic counselor by training, I always go over to make sure like what the population screening is to make sure that
Sure.
you know that. So because you don't have a known uh like well there's no because there's no the genetic test did not reveal that you have an increased risk for anything related to cancer. You would be doing screening based on any known family history and then any personal history. And so looking at what we do have, you have a grandparent who had melanoma. And so, and then you have a lighter skin, you have moles, right? So it's going to be really important. I can't remember. Do you see a dermatologist every year?
Yes.
Great. And you do, and they do the mole mapping. Do they look at your
Yes.
mole? Perfect. Okay. So
Yes.
highly recommend, you'll continue with that.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at your family history now, what we have. And then, so in terms of breast risk, there's no reason to think that you have an increased risk. So you'll do the typical screening, which is a mammogram.
Amazing. I don't have to start doing mammograms early,
Yeah.
which I love because they don't sound pleasant.
Yes, yeah. And also, but what you should be doing is everybody with breasts should be doing self breast exams. And there's some conflicting evidence on it, but it's always a good idea to just know your breasts and know what's normal. And then if you do find a lump or you feel anything off, you have pain, you have nipple discharge, then make sure you go see a doctor and let them know. Because when you know you're normal, then you also can tell when something is not normal.
Yeah.
So I like to think of it as like breast awareness.
Breast awareness, everybody.
Yes,
Become familiar with your boobies.
Yes.
Or your partner's boobies.
But I should also say, like, men can get breast cancer too. So so if there's any lumps anywhere on the chest, anybody should go in and get that checked out.
Okay.
As soon as possible. But other than that, if you don't have any lumps, everything's looking good, then you'll just do the normal screening that's recommended, which is, the mammograms at 40. And then in terms of colon cancer, because I always think about colon cancer risk in people too. Again, there's nothing saying that you would have an increased risk. So you'll do population screening for that. And depending on your institution, it's usually about 45 that we start, or between 40 and 45, depending on which guidelines you're looking at. And that's with colonoscopies every 10 years, or there's some other options too for people that are at average risk that are not appropriate for people who have high risk, but you don't have high risk at this point. And then you're going to be doing your pap smears in the increments that your gynecologist tells you to be doing them. And that's for cervical cancer specifically. So
yes.
That's just for cancer of the cervix.
I literally just did a pap smear. So huzzah for me.
You're good.
Yeah,
great.
I'm good.
Yeah. And then so those are the main like population screens that you would, that I'd want to make sure. And I'm going to put all this in your note because I'm going to write up a note that summarizes all your results. And then
good. I was about to say, like, I don't remember how, like 90% of the things that you told me. I know there was a fever one, and cystic fibrosis, but that's about it. So I definitely need a written copy so that I
absolutely you're going to get, and there's several, because I did this in several reports. You're going to get the reports from the lab. I'm going to release them so you can get them from the portal. And then you'll also, I'll give you the copy of the notes that I took from last time too. And so I'll just put it all in one big letter. And then I love it. So that'll be good. And what else? I just want to make sure I'm going over everything. So we talked about the cancer screening, and then the melanoma stuff, safe sun exposure. If I didn't say that, sunscreen, SPF.
I already have sunscreen on right now that are protecting me from my little podcast lights.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's great. That's so great.
Yes.
So
no, I am 100% a sunscreen girly. Yes. Yeah. No, I joke that my Crayola color is cadaver. So I've been wearing sunscreen for a very long time every day. No.
Well, that's good. It's really good. And really, actually, everybody should wear SPF regardless of your skin color. But yeah, I mean, when you burn easier, it's not fun to have, a lot of burn. So
yeah, when you glow in the dark like a fucking light bright because of how pale you are, you need to be a sunscreen person. That is who you are. Prime me up. Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like you're doing all the stuff that you should be doing right now. And there's nothing that we're going to add to your screening. Now, the other thing too, the pituitary math, because we still don't know what caused that. Obviously, you want to look for any other symptoms of that. Make sure that you have your doctor's aware of that history. And if you do have any really abnormal symptoms or abnormal medical issues that pop up that are unexplained, making sure that whoever's assessing you knows about that history.
So, Dena, hypothetically, like, let's say, so I'm a carrier for cystic fibrosis, right? So what happens if we find out that Dave is also a carrier for cystic fibrosis?
Sure. Great question. So if you carry one copy of a mutation in the CFTR gene and he does too, then the two of you would have a 25% chance for each child that they would inherit both abnormal copies. So do you remember Punnett squares from biology class way back in the day?
No.
Okay. Well, totally fine. A lot of people will remember that. But basically, the chances of each child inheriting no mutation is 25%. The chances of them being a carrier is 50%, and the chance of them having cystic fibrosis is 25%. So, because that chance is high, there are two big options when it comes to avoiding passing this down. So the first that we talk about in many cases is getting pregnant naturally and testing a fetus very, very early to see if they have cystic or they would have that disease. And if they do, some people will decide at that point to terminate the pregnancy, but that's not the right option for everybody. It's not an easy option by any means. And it also depends on what state you're in these days, if that's even an option. So the second option is usually much easier well, it's not easy, but it's a different option for people, which is doing IVF with something called pre-implantation genetic testing for monogenic conditions, so PGTM. And that allows us to, it allows a couple to create embryos and then look at the embryos and only implant ones that are not affected with the disease in question. So that's a way to then also ensure that you have a child that does not have the condition in question. So those are options. And then the other options that we always present also are donor egg or donor sperm, or adoption. Those are the other, ways that we sometimes will present that. But if you are trying to have, if you are trying to have a child that's like genetically or biologically from you guys, then the IVF with PGTM is a really good option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I like it. We have action items. But Dena, thank you. This is huge. This is massive. And I mean, this was, again, I am a donor. I'm one of the donor conceived people who has nothing. There was nothing. There was no donor number. There was nothing. There was no carrier screen. There was nothing that my donor tested for. So the fact that like I have this now is a piece of it. I now have something tangible, and that's huge. And Good. So thank you for at least giving me I have a little step. I got a baby piece of that puzzle, and I'm going to take that piece of the puzzle, and it's enough information that we can at least get my husband tested for the same things and, be safe. And that's awesome. So thank you so much. And everybody go follow Dena at Dena DNA. And that's DENA, not DINA.
Yes.
And Dena, one E. And Dena, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really happy I could do this for you. And I think I mentioned earlier, but these are some of my favorite cases to work with, because I do feel that it's pretty unfair that people, can't get insurance to cover testing when they don't have a family history of something. And I look forward to the day when everyone can just get the same big test and just know the information for themselves. So I like to provide that while we are waiting for that day to come, right?
As it should. Because we need more. We are in the perfect world of, medicine. And I mean, we have a long ways to go till our medical system is like fair and stuff. But I think, switching more into preventative care then
Uh-huh.
is absolutely the way to go. And it seems like this is a big piece of it that
Yeah.
we could absolutely be doing. So I'm right there with you.
And actually I should mention too, there are two options for people. I forgot to mention these two other options. So there's a study going on right now called All of Us, which is for people that live in the United States. And they're trying to offer basically the same panel for all these different people. They're trying to diversify the genomic database. So they're trying to offer it to a lot of people that are even non-European so that they can really get a good idea of normal variation in different ancestry groups. But anybody can do it. It's free. You sign up. It's through the government. And it's not as extensive of a panel as what we did, but it's still pretty good. And it's, like I said, it's no cost. So for
Amazing.
people who just want to enroll in this database, it is an option. That's All of Us. And I think if you look it up, it's like .gov or something because it's
Okay.
government funded. So that's one thing. And there was something else I wanted to mention too. Now I'm having a brain fart.
I hate that. I know. I swear sometimes my thoughts just tumble out of my head.
Yeah. What was the other thing? Yeah, no, okay. I guess, yeah, we can cut that part out.
That's fine.
Yeah. So the last part, that I just like the last piece of advice for anybody that wants this testing is that if you can't get your doctor to order it and you're talking to somebody like a genetic counselor who says, this won't be covered, just asking about financial aid, and then also just saying you're willing to pay out of pocket. There are more tests like this that are coming out, and there's something called, this is what I was going to say. There's something called healthy genomes or healthy exome testing, which actually looks at all the different coding regions of a gene, and it's kind of newer and it's going to be pricier, but I do see that as being an option in the future for people who truly just want to know everything they can, for people who are true info seekers and just want to be as preventative as possible. So that's something that I'm looking in as we learn more about these types of tests, and as the tests get better and less expensive, I'm going to start offering those in my practice as well.
Amazing.
And I think other genetic counselors will too. So that's another thing to just look forward to on the horizon, is that the better our technology gets, the more we can learn. And so once you test once, you can that's great. And that can be, give you a lot of peace of mind. But if you do keep testing, then you have the opportunity to learn more and more. And I'd say usually like every 5 years probably is a good increment of when to update testing. And it's not something you have to do, but it's for people who just want as much information as possible. It is an option. And I like to cater to those people because I think it's, like I said, it's fair to just want to know and to want to do it in a way that is healthy and ethical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dena,
cool.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this information. And I'm going to go upstairs right now and tell Dave to get ready to go spit in a tube.
My question for you. One more question for you. How are you feeling now versus how you were feeling in the beginning of the call?
Oh, I feel good. I feel better. I feel like, okay. No, I feel a lot better. Education is power.
It is. Knowledge is power. Totally.
Knowledge is power, everybody.
I always like to check in because I know the beginning of a results call can be really anxiety provoking, but typically people, even with positive results, they actually feel better at the end of the call because they can talk through, ask questions, and feel like they have a plan.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you're feeling good.
I'm feeling very good. And thank you to Dena DNA. And thank you to everybody else who's listening. I will see you all next week. Go be awesome. Go be amazing. Please go follow Dena. And let's go be awesome. I'm gonna go take a few deep breaths now because that was weirdly nerve-wracking, but I feel a lot better. So whew. All right. Have a great day, everyone. And thank you, Dena.
Thank you.